Welcome to the second session for today in the fast delivery track. Before I introduce the speaker, I just want everyone to know that you have the questions and the polls section below. If you have any questions, please click on the questions section below and enter your question. At the end of the session, we will have a polls being pushed where you can give your feedback. So today we have Amélie, who's joined us for today's session. She's an adept senior technology leader with broad experience in both public and private sectors across a range of business sectors. She's got 20 years of progressive hands-on experience in advanced technologies and cybersecurity practices, developing tactical and strategic execution goals. She's led over 100 staff to deliver solutions across multiple delivery lines using agile frameworks in DevSecOps. So over to you, Amelie.
Thank you very much. Good morning for some of you. Good evening for others. My name is Amelie Koran. As they mentioned, I am a senior technology advocate for Splunk. Prior to that, I was working for the U.S. federal government in several different roles. But today I'm here to talk about DevOps and DevSecOps as a team sport. I know a lot of you who may be joining here are kind of individual contributors to your various organizations. It could be anywhere from platform architects all the way to, maybe a C-level or a VP of some of the technologies you may have. But you can only succeed if you're all in it together. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. First off, let me get the slide over here since I wasn't on that. Here's some mandatory forward-looking statements that I have to basically cover here. With that, it's basically anything I say today is not intended to discuss any company strategy or direction, just merely the topic of the day, which is team building and management for DevOps and DevSecOps. Close that window here. I keep getting pop-ups for the other sessions. I hope you enjoyed the other sessions today, so that's always a good thing. As I mentioned before, my name is Amelie Koran. I'm a senior technology advocate, and what that actually means, in short, I'm paid to tell stories. Prior to Splunk, I spent 10 years in the federal government in various technology roles in several agencies. Along the way, I've also worked in academia and multiple parts of the commercial sector, including several Fortune 150 companies. So right now, the overview I'm going to give you here is kind of the state of the art. One of the issues, especially with development teams, as they work with various business units, is having a common lexicon, just general definitions and terms. DevSecOps derives its own name from being an amalgamation of formerly 3 separate common teams within most IT organizations: development, security, and operations. With the onslaught of new technologies and methods to build, deploy, and secure such solutions, it's become paramount to unite and streamline these traditionally separate activities. This doesn't come without its own set of challenges, from turf wars to knowledge and abilities, with most of the effort trying to wed up the right puzzle pieces to ensure overall team success. There's also no success in the area given to a group of rock stars or prima donnas, but more to the roadies and sidemen that you would find on a concert stage. Those are the folks who work to make sure the whole show is going to be good rather than just trying to take that center stage. Finding, identifying, nurturing the staff and talent that is willing to work through the change, not only within the IT organization, but are also the best ambassadors to the rest of the organization to help them through new ways of exploring and exploiting new ways of integrating technology into your business. The first step here is communications, as I mentioned before about the common lexicon and definition and terms. That is the way to define how you will talk about your work, ensuring that everybody involved gets it and can easily share ideas and ensure that nothing or very little is lost in the translation. As communication difficulties are one of the top problems in project execution and executive and senior leadership, as well as the degrader of trust within those teams. Next up is clearly defining your expected outcomes. This is not just with your own team, but ensuring it with your customers. That's setting expectations. And then also is agreeing upon your schedule and resources. I've been in lots of cases where there's been a wish to build a cathedral, and all you have enough to build is a couple of pews. And with that is to make sure that people can understand that in order to succeed, you need to properly resource it. So a little bit of history lessons here. Traditional development and project management tended to follow a more classic waterfall process, relying on the critical path, that big bang delivery, and targeted primarily towards large enterprise heavy lift projects. Some consider SAFe or Scaled Agile framework as a way to wedge the waterfall under a new title and call it Agile. And it tends to get adopted by those who are a little bit more risk adverse and wedded to not only changing their ways of working easily. Sometimes it's called Agile Fall, and so some of those who've seen it fail call it Agile Fail. These missed adoptions can kind of leave a bad taste in people's mouths and are less ideal memories for those who may be asked to move towards moving it to a regular DevOps framework. Other times, some who are a bit more willing to just go for it rip the proverbial Band-Aid off of whatever they have stitched together between development, security, and operation teams. There are some who will start totally greenfield. That means starting totally from scratch. Others may more of a brownfield situation, and then picking to move just all at once or slowly integrate DevOps as new projects are onboarded. To make this successful, regardless of the approach, is to develop a good and clear documented change management strategy. And that so that everybody agrees and is too aware of what they are to adhere to. This helps work through not only the technical changes and modifications, but will help work through any issues that may arise between non-technical staff, business units, and others who won't be interacting with the teams daily or are maybe generally familiar with those types of technologies that are being used. So there's also some history lessons specifically on successes and failures. Your biggest challenge is managing the size and complexity of the work ahead of you. There's no product or service that you can buy your way out of it. Approaching most large-scale or enterprise projects are very ceremonial, much like the sumo wrestling, and even those which are agile framework-based. Lots of it is having to do something because that's just how it's always been done. Very rigid, very structured. A lot of times these are built into silos and serve as a single or very narrowly focused need rather than looking broadly across the needs of the entire organization, possibly missing and developing shared capabilities due to some myopathy typically demonstrated from those old models. Next is to build a platform. This is platform-centric, platform-first strategies, thinking on how it will be maintained and operated, and what it may enable, and how it may enable a organization to change how teams can think about delivering services and capabilities, because it's based on a known way or well-communicated method or strategy. It's a foundational structure from which to build a house, an office, a stadium, or cathedral upon. This also provides some modularity, allowing for new capabilities and features to be pulled out or plugged in. Using APIs between services and features is one example of how to enable these capabilities versus a closed and customized application and service. These are that could have been tightly integrated and not as loosely coupled. Much like sumo wrestling, it may seem very odd and structured activity, but to succeed, wrestlers need to be balanced and nimble because it's a very fast match, with rounds lasting only a few seconds until a winner is decided and a goal is achieved. And that's a way to attack an enterprise project as you move towards DevOps and Agile versus the typical waterfall. Now, this is very natural for Dev and Ops to do, hence the reason why Dev and Ops as a discussion has become kind of in vogue at this point. The teams at Facebook popularized this approach to Agile, and it was move fast and break things. But this has really become more of the mantras to allow the teams smartly iterate by failing for it. If you're trying something new, ideating on and testing out concepts, you will also probably fail often. However, it should be blameless. You are trying something your team and organization probably isn't familiar with in any form and hasn't ever done. The biggest change in most organizations who followed the waterfall approach is moving from a very linear delivery cycle and features and capabilities to one of small cycles and iterative delivery. There's no one concept of a big bang delivery, but incremental capabilities until it's finally reaching the quality specified for an MVP or a minimal viable product. Along the way in DevOps teams, it is important to define that the system or application is going to be run and maintained. This is sometimes often another big change for those in linear models as they are delivered, and then it's usually up to everyone to figure out how to integrate it and run it afterwards. And that's the change in the thinking of the planning and development and release cycles. It's also vitally important for those teams to adopt Agile and DevOps and eventually DevSecOps. It's the push for permissionless innovation. This is the idea of being that nobody has a lock on good ideas, and that by exploring them often and at any time, inspiration may strike and end up solving problems earlier and quicker than a more rigid model. This also has a side benefit of reducing fear of failure among teams by letting it be okay to fail a little, as long as you learn something from it and share it with the others from what you've learned. So going on more about it being natural for the dev and ops teams to do this, and eventually security. As you move towards DevOps, the skills and knowledge among team members will be shared, an opportunity for cross-training, optimizing your resources and skill sets. Some that exist in existing teams may be reinforced and complementary, but some may be missing and can be also highlighted during these transitions. It's a simple gap analysis. Fear often occurs when there's an unknown future or a potential situation that differs from expectations. It's important to ensure that team members understand their roles and that the responsibilities and scope of influence and where they're empowered to do good. And that's important. Make sure they're empowered to do good. Remove the fear of failure. Over time, there will be an eventual migration to a shared ownership and responsibility model with skills that can be interchanged or swarmed when there is an increased need or demand. Everybody scrubs in who can help and ensure things are kept on schedule and the delivery is met. DevSecOps only works if there's a shared ownership and responsibility model, which is difficult in most organizations where it's easier and common to point fingers and cast blame rather than own up. Work towards solving the problem and move along with a lesson learned. This is not creating those walls, but helping break them down and allow a healthy attitude of asking for help when they need it. And from my leadership experience too, I keep an open door policy, and for me, it was a matter of allowing people when they were struggling to come with me with a question and have a chance to discuss it either with me directly or get the right people in the room to talk about it. That's a culture change, and those are some of the hardest things to do during this period. Next up, obviously, we're going to touch on security because we're talking about DevSecOps. And it's generally mainly misunderstood in most organizations. It's kind of the black arts, some magic that people do to kind of make sure things that run straight and well. So most of you are here come to this hopefully getting a slight grounding and experience with DevOps, or at least are familiar with the term or those who it involves. You can see Dev and Ops are tightly overlapped in a Venn diagram, so two circles and overlap there, with fringes and operation development activities that may exist outside that complete overlay, stuff that just doesn't get integrated. The progression to this would be to take those two areas being separate, and as efficiency and resiliency drives these two roles together, IT is not made up of just the two groups above, but it'll also need to involve security, so you're adding that third overlay circle in that Venn diagram. While Dev and Ops began this transition, they had to be open and transparent, and that's why they build up that trust. It is based on a healthy working relationship from sharing, communicating to one another, and then building it as a foundation of a partnership rather than as approaching it as adversaries and competing goals and methods. Security is usually seen as the house of no, that opaque house of no, and a stamp required for development operation teams to proceed with pushing something live, a gate which they must pass. It's always been pushed as a painful exercise, the last hoop to hop through. The often stated goals for DevSecOps is to move security further left in the SDLC. This, like that Venn diagram, has security now as an overlay, another intersecting sphere, and eventually covering more and more of that area, which should reflect more and more of those integrations. This eventually breaks down the house of no and maybe gets to the house of maybe, or maybe the house of yes. Again, one of the things about misunderstanding is education. It's very important not to treat it as this selfish model is the only security people can learn. I come from the security arena and background, and one of the things that a lot of conferences like DEF CON, Black Hat, a lot of the B-sides that exist around the world is knowledge sharing. We feel that the more people who know about security, the less stressed that we are, and the more that they can learn and integrate into their own work and skills, and it makes them better. So we should, as part of establishing a clear and transparent communication, is to keep it at levels that are commensurate with your target audience skills and awareness. It's possibly too deep, maybe too technical to take the time and educate if you don't have the resources to do it. But if you do have that time, sit down and educate the folks. It'll help you refine your messaging. So if you're speaking to a high-level individual, don't go into the bits and bytes of some of the security stuff, but learn to kind of brief up. It'll carry over later by reducing that overhead required to communicate them in the future. So they have that idiom of, teach a person to fish, they'll feed themselves forever. And this is one of those cases you teach enough people about security that they'll be security-minded to carry it forward. Security specifically is always somewhat mystical and misunderstood specialty, helping to drive that whole house of no mentality. And by avoiding asking the tough questions, or even the very basic ones, pushing off those difficult topics that if they would have been addressed earlier and willingly, could save time and frustration from all parties. Use these times as a teaching opportunity, that ability to cross-train and share knowledge, and build more security awareness and skilled people in your organization. So in case you wonder what that thing is off to the side, that's a ball pit. I don't know if everybody's familiar with those. Back in the day, back in the before times, before COVID, you can go into a McDonald's here in the United States and there's usually a ball pit that you can find kids in. So it may be a tortured metaphor here, but I just wanted to explain the thing there. So as part of the aspects of an organization, by definition of an organization, is that they maintain some form or structure. Groups will typically self-associate based upon their goals, their skills, or some other arbitrary alignment. Those are the creations of swim lanes or towers or other structured silos. And those are creations based on the area expertise to support requested outcomes, but are also often rigid with tasks and those resources that are assigned to the swim lanes. Not allowing to kind of work across there. So work and information is tossed from swim lane to swim lane. It's not basically integrated in. There's no flow. The shared responsibility often ends at these lane markers. So as they toss the things over, it's not my problem anymore. And it acts to basically isolate the teams, and those behaviors that are there perfectly isolate them from potentially adverse blowback. And those effects from it. So it's unfortunately one of those cases where that self-imposed isolation removes that responsibility or potentially removes that possibility to have a buy-in to a shared goal. And it does really isolate folks even when you do get a success. That swim lane or that silo may be the only people who claim that success, even though you may have contributed to it. Other organizations are a bit more loosely associated, where it's more of a free-for-all, or that ball pit I mentioned about. While everybody can kind of play in the ball pit, it's a little chaotic, a little haphazard, but it's transparent. Everybody sees everything that's going on. And folks can recognize when others need help. Say they get buried under the balls and they need to be pulled out. It's easier to extend it too. It'll get messy, and the outcome may not be pretty or necessarily what has been carefully planned, like those in a swim lane structure. Regardless of which structure or lack thereof that is here, some of the organizations that are resistant to change of any kind and may be intractable enough not to want to curb their habits, those habitual ways of performing business, using their technology, even how they look at their customers, users, and market. If you can and have the right role, make this fun and not something to dread. Overcoming aversion to risk and change can be the right catalyst to help create a high-performing team and successful activity. Hopefully many of you have learned riding a bike that you're going to make a couple mistakes, land on the ground, hurt yourself a little bit. It's going to happen. That's just the nature of technology nowadays is to basically fall forward. That's how you learn. The visceral connection of pain to an activity sometimes it may keep you from ever doing it again, but other times it drives points, don't do that again, or maybe change how you behave. Getting DevSecOps together for organization will require some time and effort to coagulate it. Sorry, I was just checking someone had a question on here. It'll take a lot to coagulate and gather and align all those things for success. One of the best lessons you can learn and take away from all of this is to pace yourself. It's easy for a team or an organization to be overeager to do everything using DevOps and Agile. And of course, the mantra for modern development technologies is to fail fast and break things, a la Facebook. But they should also fail forward and learn from those experiences. If you do it too fast and do too much, you lose that feedback loop you get from the experience and the ability to integrate it into possible changes and improvements. Taking on way too much at first will also hamper success because of the volume. While working the possible percentages for success, it's actually lower if you start out with a few smaller projects to ensure you and your teams have the process down pat and near muscle memory in performing them. Even the greatest athlete or musician and other performer can make mistakes regardless of how much they have done it and how often they've used it. This is why YouTube has plenty of footage of those little failure videos and blooper reels. But making these mistakes also allows the individual to feel and remember those base emotions, that visceral feeling, and know how good or bad they were when that was reinforced. This will hopefully reduce the severity of failures and enhance the wins, and potentially reduce failures going further in the future. You can never maximize or minimize either, as humans drive this, and we are prone to error. To error is human, as they say. This is a cycle. DevOps and DevSecOps is iterative, as cycles will be, and as part of the learning is learning how to gracefully recover from these mistakes. Test for cases, but also be observant of points where things may fail. For many of you, you've probably come into organizations, whether or not you've been there for years or you're just starting a new job. And the first thing I know I observe when I kind of come in is there's these tribes, these cliques, where people kind of naturally associate. And they may be, an IT person and a business unit person or someone from legal and HR. You kind of see where group motivations are. And this slide covers an organizational behavior that occurs after teams and business units begin to isolate and get, to put it lightly, selfish. Probably from historical operations of an organization, politics, time and tradition, behaviors are learned and passed on, some by design and some by happenstance and need. The way that DevOps and DevSecOps can help nurture the good ones and work to dispose of the bad or unwanted ones is one of the first habits, be good or bad, is, depending on how universally it's exercised, is good communication. Clearly communicating your strategies, plans, goals, and tie into your business outcomes and mission of your organization, your staff and your DevOps and DevSecOps teams can help build the trust that is necessary to have a unified vision. This also helps create community and ties into the needs of everybody involved in its execution. I say here, fishing for the village and not the boat captain is a parable to do the work required to support the entire community and organization rather than just one person, regardless of their role or stature in the organization. An organization is always going to be more than one person, no matter what may be perceived or marketed as such. Success rides on people, not a person, and it also rides on working together with common tools, understanding, and a lexicon and methods that are part of the support structure for DevSecOps and DevOps. A referenceable framework that acts as a scaffolding needed to hand all of this off to other folks as you begin to deliver. The leadership that is required to make this successful is what gives them themselves support rather than just to pull along. This is that servant leadership model. It's easier to show people the way rather than drag them along. This is a culture change. It also changes with the type of person you end up hiring in those roles. It's one of those things you kind of can't interview for now and again, and it's a lot easier to basically allow those types of people to decide, but not dictate. Give them a choice, but don't be dictatorial. Leadership that is required to make this successful is what gives them themselves the ability to lay out the path and align the resources and help be the arbiter of the choice. The team must be willing to follow that leadership and make it appetizing and interesting for other folks to follow. Show them the path, give them the map, Let them find their own way. It may be a different path as they go and explore. Yeah. Again, too, is letting go in the end of that tech tribalism. I've come into many organizations and the development team sticks together with the development team, and the operations people stick together with the operations team, and the security people are off in a corner. And, there could be, even within the operations team, the actor director people just kind of hang out and go to lunch with one another, and they never talk to any of the server people or the cloud people that you may have. It's really kind of difficult to kind of get over. And the challenge for most technically oriented people are those soft skills. We often revel in our awkwardness and single-mindedness towards achieving those goals. This is healthy, but since we are also dealing with breathing, live human beings, we need to communicate, often to others outside our own expertise. In the business world, this is talking to folks responsible for various business units, budgeting and accounting, procurement and acquisition, legal and HR. They consume various aspects of what an IT organization provides as a subset, as well as what a DevOps and DevSecOps teams would generate. Capturing that value, what they consume and why they consume it at those touch points, also makes sure that value is collected and shown back to them is a vital important for quantifying that worth. One of those cases within organizations is, if they only use the help desk when something goes wrong, they only think of IT as the help desk, but not realize that you're providing applications and capabilities to them on a day-to-day basis. You're seen as a cost center or just basically a utility rather than a partner in your business. As that utility, you pay to keep the bits of flowing over the network and the spreadsheets from crashing. But selling up innovation and modernization is hard because it's more conceptual than tactile. You have to let people support you based on faith very often, being able to communicate that, yes, we will deliver this, or this is what's happening behind the curtain. And especially if this is something new for your organization, if you're moving to DevOps and DevSecOps or adopting Agile or moving to the cloud, this is typically something that's just occurring now. Some organizations are a lot more forward towards that, but some are still catching up to that. Aligning your work between the business goals and those desired outcomes helps tie the value of your work to those business lines. It makes it intimately tied to the core operations of the organization rather than just a support mechanism. Innovation can also assist in re-engineering business processes, which may have become a little messy and convoluted from their original design. Return on investment, or ROI, is still a concept often flogged for organizations as the only and overall measure of success. But not as all organizations have a profit motive, say nonprofits, governmental organizations. The concept of a return on spending resources to recover an investment isn't always a good measure, let alone something that should drive a KPI. Use measures that address outcomes, both qualitative and quantitative, that can be instrumented from the work stream and development life cycles. Key thing is to look to what you're delivering and how it supports the mission, rather than just basically generates a profit or some type of return, financial return. That's more of that qualitative. It's those soft measures rather than just the hard numbers. Developing those KPIs are challenging, but it's still capable. Finally, some takeaways and a kind of a call to action for all of you. Let's see. DevSecOps and even DevOps is still relatively new, so each organization's experience and path will be very different. This is experiential learning. You'll need to find your own way of doing it. Best practices in observing the failures and successes of peer organizations or even peer teams within your own organization. There will be some pain, but again, this is all about teamwork. And one head is not as good as 2 or 5 or 20. Don't be that individual. You're not alone. Build those teams. Share in the experience. There's no lift and shift that will work for just DevOps and DevSecOps. Yeah, there are guides and how-tos and even plenty of talks like this one on how to prepare, transition, and succeed, but your business and ops is yours uniquely. And there's a human element to all of this, and that's the ability to adapt and change. Humans are exceptionally great at this. We advance by running down the right and wrong roads, the adaptation through the resiliency that's built into humans. Our ability to use language to express and share concepts allows us to evolve faster, and in most cases, better. This is not to say we are infallible. I would guess for every great success, there are plenty of failures. There are lessons learned, however, and that should give us some comfort. To say we are breaking new ground would possibly still be a misnomer here. This is almost a bit on the level of an initial space exploration, where we've been told to do things better and faster with sometimes the modicum of resources and told to spin gold thread out of lead. Each industry is trying to find their own way around this, seeing what works and what doesn't apply to past operations and align it to be the desired outcomes for the work they want to do. Matching what the KPIs, measures of performance, as well as operating models will generally be developed on the fly. It will be important to find ways to instrument that process to ensure that you can quantify and qualify as well as measure those qualitative and quantitative measures. Some of these are going to be what feels rather than those hard and bankable numbers because you're dealing with the impressions of people rather than just instrumenting them. ROI, as I mentioned, is still a fungible number in those cases, and it's to be applied to as it can be applied to your environment and enterprise and can't just be lifted from others. It can be modeled, for example, from those competitors or similar organizations or previous processes, but it's not just a clear move from here to there type of model. So if you were doing something previously in the past, you can use that to inform how you're going to do something in the future, but there's no way to basically carbon copy that across. Finally, enjoy the journey. Value your team. Allow them to shine. Don't rely on a solitary genius to make all of this happen. You can get the ball and goal if everybody's working together efficiently. And with that, thank you for your time. Do take care, be safe, and I believe we will be taking some questions shortly.
Yeah, thanks, Amelie. So before we start the questions, I'd just like to ask everyone to enter your questions in the section below. And we'll just wait for 1 minute just to see if there are any more questions. In the meantime, there will be a poll push to get your feedback. So please look out for that. That's also the section below. Please give us your feedback. Thank you, Amelie, for giving your time to share your thoughts and experiences. I'm sure all of us is going to have we've got a lot of inputs from your thoughts about DevSecOps, and I'm sure all of that is coming from your experience. Hi all, thank you for attending the second day of TAC 2020. It's been a wonderful day, and we had a lot of lively informative sessions. So the day has come to an end. We will have a third and final day tomorrow at 5 p.m. India time. So we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Amelie.